All right, welcome back live at Drew's house, another edition. Hope everybody is doing okay out there. We are flying through March, my goodness. A little bit more cold here in the Boston area, and then I think we're starting to turn towards spring. So there's that. Enough about me. You hear the man laughing in the background. I am, what an honor to be joined by the great Don McLean joining us today. First time on the show. Don, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
It is great to talk with you. You're coming to us from the West Coast. I know you got some places in Maine, but West Coast today, right?
Yes, that's correct. I'm near Palm Springs, near all my Cowboy stars like Gene Autry and Hopalong Cassidy. That's where I am.
There you go. I could tell just by the T-shirt. I'm here in my winter hat. Everything's still cold here in the Boston area.
Yeah, you know, I've had a lot of that. I was born in New Rochelle, New York, and then I moved up on the Hudson River, and then I moved up closer to Canada in Maine, and I've loved the winter, but it's really nice not to have one this year.
Absolutely. Well, I have a lot to talk with you about here. First of all, you said you moved out there to see a lot of your heroes. Who was the first man that made you pick up a guitar, made you want to be a star? Who was the first person that inspired you, young age?
You know, well, I think back on it now. I've never said this in an interview before, but I think seeing Gene Autry and Roy Rogers and stuff on television play guitars before I ever saw Elvis Presley made me probably think about, you know, wanting to play something and sing. I love to sing, and I knew as I got older, then I saw Elvis and loved his records, and, you know, just like how he looked, you know, with a guitar. And so, and that happened to a lot of people, and the folk thing hit. So everybody was playing guitars, you know, and it was all kind of, you know, blended together. And but with the folk thing, now you could actually learn a lot of practical ways of playing the guitar, like you would learn if you were, you know, lived in the country.
Yeah.
And America was still, this is something I like to emphasize a little bit, was still very, very remote. Even in 1960, there was a show on television called PM East and PM West. And so it was a big deal to have a transmission from the West Coast, even in 1960.
Yeah.
And or a color presentation on television. So people forget that, you know, it was very and nobody ever knew what was going on down south. You know, they didn't broadcast up north. And it was still quite a divide between North and South. And forget the Midwest; they were on their own, you know. But everything was happening still in New York City: theater and music and Carnegie Hall and television. And then, you know, remember the Tonight Show moved out to the coast. They made that big move out of New York. So still, even then, slowly uniting the country. And so I remember more and more country artists coming up north because the radio signals had gotten stronger, and there was now, you know, a demand to see Flatt and Scruggs or Buck Owens or whoever in the 1960s.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, radio played such a big role. Do you remember like the fight to get on the radio? Do you remember like just hearing that big song on the radio for the first time, that sort of deal?
Yeah, well, I remember it very well. It changed my whole world and never looked back. It's still changed. And the thing about it is that you were number one in America, and I was number one in every radio station. Then you were like Valentino, you know, in the silent era. I mean, everybody knew you, and there was no confusion about what was number one. They're now 500 radio stations or something. I don't know what's one or two or what the heck anything is, you know. And how did Ed Sheeran sneak in there, you know, doing this social, you know, networking so well and everything with 20 million followers, and suddenly he's the biggest draw in the world. A brilliant way that he did that. So there's a lot of ways of doing things now. And but in those days, there were only 3 stations in New York City, and I had that experience 3 different times, because Crying was number one, Vincent was number one, and American Pie was number one over a period I had those experiences from 1971 until like 1981.
Since you just mentioned it, why don't I just jump in here and say I work in a newsroom in Boston, WBZ News Radio, and I had a few people knew I was going to be talking to you, and they wanted to say thank you for Vincent. They say it's one of their 3 guys came up to me and said it's one of their favorite songs. It's beautiful.
Well, I'm so glad that I've been able to contribute something that's lasted a long time and meant something to people. I would have been very happy to have been able to get by making music, have a little house somewhere, and and just like that. But it turns out I did some things that ended up being very big, and the whole thing got a whole lot bigger. But I guess whatever talent you have, you rise as far as you're going to rise. And you even if you might have low expectations, sometimes what you're doing brings you to a much higher level. So that's what happened to me.
I've heard you say that before. You would have been happy just making a living and playing bars or whatever. But when did it hit you? There must have been a moment when you said, ooh, things have gotten a little bit bigger than maybe even I even.
Oh, well, I was, playing several nights at the Royal Albert Hall and sold out, and the royal family was there. And, everywhere I went in the States, I was news at night. I'd be on CBS News. So it got as big as it gets, basically. Yeah.
Was there like one moment though where you were almost surprised by it? Like, okay, this is like a new level.
Oh yes, I was surprised by it, and it after a couple of weeks it started to wear me out, and it lasted a long time. It's still going, really. It's the reason we're still talking is that American Pie right now, the version of it by Home Free is #1 on all the country video charts. So how about that? What do you know?
One of my questions was gonna be, does it ever get to be a burden, or do you ever get sick of it, knowing that you're gonna have to talk about American Pie every time you do an interview, or do you like it?
Well, I don't dislike it, and I don't like it, but I don't mind talking about anything that anybody wants to talk about, and they can ask me about any song I've written or any album. And most interviewers ask me a lot of questions about all sorts of things I've done, but there has always been a fascination with that song. And it was a phenomenon from the moment it came out, and everything went to #1, the album, the single, the whole bit. So I accept and I'm happy for that fact that it's been a career maker, especially at this age that I am, to still be having this thing power my career is a gift.
It's funny, that song, it's easy to see why it's timeless. It's obviously beautiful, and it plays great on the radio, but besides that, I'm 34 years old, okay? And I mean, that song brings me, you look back on what was happening in America, and it brings you right back to those days, and
there's going to be a documentary movie made about this, exactly that, what was going on in those years, 69 to 72, and it's going to be an in-depth movie about my life, the song's life, the country's life, what was happening. And most people have no idea, because they've been through a rather tumultuous 4 years with Donald Trump, and thinking that was also unstabilizing, and they have no idea what it was like under Nixon and LBJ, because the cities were on fire. It was unbelievable. And so American Pie came out of that kind of a political cauldron, if you will.
Yeah, you think about a pandemic, you had the Black Lives Matter movement. There must have been some moments where you're kind of looking at present day and going, well, a lot of this does look familiar.
Well, I don't like the idea of, and I'll be frank with you, I don't consider America to have systemic racism at all. What I do think is you've got some terrible police officers that need to go to jail for killing people. And all of them have been Black people who should never have been treated that way, for sure. But I think that they've morphed it into something else. I think it denigrates the tremendous progress that Black folks have made in the last 50 years, where they're in bureaucracies and government, they're professionals, they're teachers, they're everywhere doing a great job. And, it's not like it was in 1964 at all, when it was all white and the Southern Democrats, pretty much ruled the Senate. And the best thing we could do was pass a Voting Rights Act under LBJ, and then 100 years after the end of the Civil War. I mean, that's the best we could do. I mean, here it is. Now it's a whole different country.
Absolutely. Again, we're joined here by Don McLean, the great Don McLean. I wanted to ask you something about your singing and your songwriting and your performances, because what I've always loved about you is, yeah, you can go up and you can play with the biggest bands. You could play with a symphony if you wanted and do whatever. But I love the fact that you can sit down with your acoustic guitar and just steal the show, steal a room with that big voice of yours. Is there something great at just being able to grab that guitar and just you and the guitar? And there's something really simple and great about that, isn't it?
Well, the show will always go on, even if the band doesn't show up,
Has that happened before?
I've performed solo many times in my life for a whole 20 years, really, from 1970 really till the 80s, I guess, for a good 15 years. It was just me on stage. And I played every major hall in the world many times. And there's YouTubes of that you can see, especially if you go to my YouTube channel. And, but, yeah, I can, it's all the songs are written off the guitar. So, there are figures that I've done or whatever, I mean, I'm a fairly good guitar player for what I do, but I'm not a James Taylor, who is a very, very good guitar player and who does some really intricate and beautiful classical type things. I'm a good rhythm guitar player, and I'm a pretty good bluegrass guitar player, and I do arrangements of songs like Vincent or Castles in the Air and I Love You So. Those all come off of how I, parts that I play on the guitar.
Yes, but that voice though too, you genuinely love to sing, don't you? I mean, there's some people who would rather be picking away and almost sometimes rather be doing guitar solos, that sort of thing. You genuinely enjoy singing. I can see the pleasure in your voice.
I really do. And when I'm wide open and singing well, I just go for it. And, I can hit all the notes and I'm right on. And it's one of the things I miss about having been home now all this time, is getting out there and testing the waters, and I need to do a tour basically to get back in shape. Yeah. And what I'll do next year probably will be starting performing in the United States and then build up to probably a 3-month overseas tour, going to many, many cities in Europe and around the world. I will go to Asia. I will go to Australia, New Zealand. And, but it's going to take a few months of getting me up to speed again, because you don't want to go out there and overdo it. That's the worst thing you can do as a singer.
What have you been doing to pass the pandemic time?
Well, I've written a new album of new songs called American Boys. And I've put up this YouTube channel, and we've negotiated agreements for a Broadway show and a documentary movie and a children's book.
Oh, cool.
And all that stuff's going to happen. It's happening right now. In fact, on Saturday, I do the first interview for this documentary. And so I have a lot to do every day. And then because of this home free thing, I'm being asked to do a lot of interviews and Zooms about, my career and the song and the album. And I'm very grateful for it, really, and happy to do it.
I remember you did a lot of interviews for American Pie. What was it, 45 years last time around? Was that the big number the last time? And then I think...
I don't remember.
I believe it was, but I remember seeing you around a lot talking about that song. And it was just fascinating how into that song even the younger generations are now. And, you can hear it on the radio today. Do you ever just catch it when you're driving around? Do you ever hear the thing on the radio and just go,
Oh yeah, it'll be somewhere, or
yeah.
my girlfriend is saying they're playing your song, or and I'll hear Vincent, I'll hear Castles, I'll hear Crying, I'll hear Since I Don't Have You, um, too, in the grocery store, and Rite Aid or whatever. But Since I Don't Have You is the best record I think I ever made, and I hit a note on that I never hit again. And Larry Butler produced that song, and I wish I'd done more records with him, and I wish I'd done more record covers with George Whiteman, who created the cover of American Pie. He was so creative, and yet I just went on to something else. There were some things I wish I'd done more of.
Isn't that just an artist, though? I feel like every artist never feels like they have the perfect work when they look back on it.
Oh, absolutely. I don't listen to my own records much. Just, occasionally I'll listen to Since I Don't Have You and think, man, that's a cool record. I like the way that sounds, But I listen to other things. And I like working on things. I'm doing this new album, so we're making tracks. My producer was out here, and I was doing all the vocals and putting my guitar and stuff. And we're reworking about a dozen Christmas songs from Christmas album that I put out. It has about, I guess, 30 songs on it. We're doing about 12 of those, and I'm getting them the way I really wanted them. And it's going to be really nice. We're going to come out with a Christmas remix this Christmas for folks.
Sweet. Hopefully when people can get back with their families and gather together.
Yeah.
And I hope your family, I meant to open the show with that. I hope everybody close to you is doing all right. And
everybody's doing great.
Good. All right. Well, glad to hear that. It's been a tough year for so many. I know that.
It certainly has.
I was thinking earlier, you and Prince have a lot of similarities. I was thinking about this because I've heard you talk about the business aspect, about how you always wanted to own your music and you wanted control of it. He was obviously huge on that. Another thing he was big on, I remember him saying, and you just struck my ear there when you were talking about covers. He said he never used to mind his friends, covering songs and stuff, but he always thought it was weird, strange when somebody he doesn't know would make a big hit of it. And obviously American Pie has to be one of the more covered songs out there. How do you feel about that when somebody that maybe you don't even know is out there having a hit with it?
Well, truly, And I Love You So and Vincent are the ones that were covered a lot. And American Pie is not covered all that much because it's kind of hard to get a handle on. That's why this home free version, they do the whole song, and they do it incredibly well, is quite a feat, of accomplishment. But when I heard George Michael do The Grave on television to protest the invasion of Iraq, I thought it was brilliant. And I, at that moment, realized how much talent he had. When I've heard James Blake's version of Vincent, or Ed Sheeran's version of Vincent, or Ellie Goulding's version of Vincent, that tells me they're very talented interpreters of music, because it's not an easy song to do. And so it's a nice test in a way to see whether somebody is just faking it or they can really sing. And of course, we'll never have the singers like we had, in the 1950s and even the 60s, the great stylists, like Sarah Vaughan and Billy Eckstine and all these people. They are really a unique breed of cat, that came up. And I love those people. I love Arthur Prysock, and Brooke Benton is one of my favorites. I'm into singers, and that's why I liked Elvis and Roy Orbison.
Yeah.
And Marty Robbins. I even did an album called Don McLean Sings Marty Robbins, and that's on the YouTube channel.
Absolutely. Go check that out immediately after this, folks. And who else? You just mentioned a bunch of those younger artists. Is there a younger artist, or you're keeping tabs on it, obviously? Is there a group of artists or whatever that you're kind of saying, all right, this is good hope for the younger kids?
I don't see anything that interests me, but it's not It's just because I have these old-fashioned standards that nobody can meet anymore is basically the problem. When I hear, like, for example, I saw the halftime show at the Super Bowl,
Yep.
and those are always a very athletic event. I remember seeing Madonna do a cartwheel on a set of steps in high heels at her time when she did the Super Bowl at halftime. So it's not really about the music so much anymore as it is about the spectacle. It really is more about Liberace than it is about Irving Berlin, or Don McLean for that matter. But, it has to do with having a different set of standards and a different understanding of what music is. But one of the things that really amazes me is how terrible the sound is. I couldn't understand one word of what was being said on that Super Bowl halftime show. And I was thinking, man, I mean, haven't they got the right microphone at least to hear these singers sing? It's really annoying.
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why a lot of people did not give it great reviews. And that was the weekend, of course, this year. But I do kind of miss the days of counting it off and going out there and having those bands just play.
Yeah,
But I guess that's a whole nother show we could have on that. But
that's true.
you talk about the weekends thing, though. You do bring up a good point. There's the sound is tough, but there's also like a lot of other stuff going on. You get the light and the stuff, and I think so much of that is culture. When you talk about I know the weekend is on a million memes now that pop up on your phone of walking through mazes and all that stuff, and that's just kind of the world we live in. That busyness now, right?
I know it's a lot of titillation and a lot of distraction, and I think to be frank, it's brain deadening. I think that a person needs to have concentration in order to really write or sing, or you got to practice. You just can't go out there and, well, everybody thinks I can sing, so I'm going to go out and sing. That's not what you do. You have to practice for years really to get to where you were good. And, you do things second nature. And I saw Eric Clapton once live. He was incredible. He's 3 other guys with him on stage and played and sang, and really a guy who's practiced, and
yeah, it's interesting to think about that, because I was going to wonder for your take on, like, we're in that the game show world, the American Idols of the world, the Voices of the world. I've always thought if you're a big named artist who's like done the grind, who's been in the bar scene, who cut their teeth in that, and they can fall back on all the stuff they learned at the small theaters and the small clubs. I've always thought that, like, the star that kind of rises from American Idol might be looked down upon from the the big rock star. What's your take on those, like, game shows and the people that kind of rise quickly like that?
Well, I don't think they're any better than the professionals. I mean, that's why they're rising, because they're the professionals are amateurs.
Yeah.
You see, that's why. So the people go and listen to X, Y, or Z, and I won't mention their names. Then they hear some kid on the show and say, "Yeah, she sounds as good as that," and they invite them in. There's no standards, but it's great. They always had stuff like that. They had the Ted Mack Amateur Hour, and before that, they had Major Bowes in the 1930s. So there's always been a place for people to reach a large audience, in a competitive way. What I didn't like was when that Simon guy, I can't remember his name, is this Australian guy.
Simon Cowell, right?
Yeah, he would always put people down.
Yeah.
And mock people. And in the world I grew up in, if some little girl made the effort to be there and was mocked or put down by this guy, her father would be there. He punched this guy out, He's not going to treat my little girl like that, embarrass her in front of the country. But the way it is now, it seems like almost people are used to being embarrassed. And I don't like that. I didn't like that Apprentice show that Donald Trump would do. You're fired. And, when I saw, David Cassidy fired, and he was walked away with his tail between his legs. And Dionne Warwick, the same thing, had to get a cab and go home. I don't like that. That's not American.
Did you ever have some of the greats, Van Morrison? I've seen, even some of the big rock stars of today, these people that you wouldn't guess, you read their books or their bios or whatever. A lot of these guys mention like stage fright almost, not that love of performing. Do you ever have that?
Oh yeah. I think the reason that you have it is if you're basically unsure of yourself in some way. And if you get thrown, everything you thought you remembered goes out the window.
Yeah.
And then you get the look of the deer in the headlights, and you're in big trouble. And the audience knows it the second that happens. The thing about it, being a performer, is that you have to, and this is the advantage of going through the long, laborious process of working your way up over a period of 8 or 10 years, is you've seen it all. So nothing is going to throw you. So therefore, you can concentrate on what you're doing. And if something goes wrong, you make fun of it or you use it somehow. Rather than have it, all of a sudden, everything goes out of your head and you can't remember anything. That requires a great deal of experience. There's no getting around being around people, because audiences, it's almost like when you see an Olympic skater and they fall. The first time one of those guys or girls falls, you're on the edge of your seat. You figure it's going to happen again. When's it going to happen again? And you're not able to really get into the performance. And it's the same with being a performer. The minute that you seriously screw up and lose the audience, if they let you get them back, and most of the time they won't, they're going to wait for you to do it again. And it just ruins everything. So it has to be perfect.
Yeah.
And they have to know that they're in good hands with you, that you're going to take them where you are telling them they're going to be taken. And they can lose themselves and relax and listen and know that it's going to happen right. It's very important psychologically.
Have you lost a crowd and brought them back before? Can you remember some moments?
No.
As an opening act, lost a crowd and you had to bring them back, because I bet that's happened.
I didn't have the crowd to begin with in the opening act. Are you kidding? They wanted to kill me, Oh, yeah. So you'd have to go around, turn that anger and that disrespect into a standing ovation or an encore. I did it every night. I knew how to do it. That's where you learn, you see, is you learn how to turn, and you learn how to read an audience, so you can tell whether they're yours, or whether they're judging you or whatever. It's like another person. I have good antenna. I can read where something's coming from and adjust accordingly.
Absolutely. We've talked a lot about the rock stars, the Elvises of the world and all that. One of your big influences was Pete Seeger back in the day, wasn't he? The late Pete Seeger I've heard you talk about him quite a bit. What folk artist didn't he influence? My goodness. But talk about Pete Seeger a little bit and that influence on your writing.
Well, I started writing Pete when I was in junior high school.
Like letters?
Yeah, I'd write him a letter and ask him questions. And he would always he'd take 6 months, even a year sometimes, and then he'd answer me because he had so many other things to do, but he would answer his fan mail.
Yeah.
And he would give me good advice. He would say, don't try to learn too many things at once. Learn a few things very, very well, so that they really, really know them very well. And I practiced a lot. And later on, for some reason or other, I focused on him as the person that I wanted to get to know, because I knew that other artists were just purely entertainers, and I didn't really want to know about that. I wanted to know somebody who was dynamic politically as well as artistically, and he was a very subtle and a very seductive performer. Yeah. Who would draw an audience in. He would go on stage with his little flute, and he would play one of the most beautiful things you've ever heard off this Halil, which was a Jewish shepherd's flute. He'd keep it in his back pocket and pull it out and start playing this beautiful melody, and the audience would just grow calm like that. And then he'd be able to talk and this, and then he'd take his banjo and say, let's try this chorus, and all of a sudden they're singing, and the next thing you know, he's got them, and it was a beautiful thing to watch, and I learned how to do that, to be seductive with what I do rather than just blasting. And there's so much stuff that is around now, just blasting all the time, blasting, sensory assault. Is it?
It's very well said. And you described Pete very well there. Well said. We do some rapid fire to end the show. First thing that comes to mind. Can you give me a minute?
Of course I can.
Nicest man in the music business. Nicest man you ever met, or woman?
The nicest man I ever met was Alan Shulman, one of the best lawyers who freed me from my manager and who got my songs back for me and made me a wealthy man.
Well, all right, very good. How about rock star? Who's the best rock star?
Roger Daltrey is the nicest rock star I've ever met.
You're gonna tell me the worst one?
I don't want to say that. I don't want to say that.
Best person you ever performed with? Who was the best person that you were a little bit starstruck yourself? I can't believe I'm here on stage with this person.
Well, it was Seeger, for sure, because I'd grown up with him, and then later Garth Brooks, who was the biggest. He's still the bull of the woods. He's still the biggest thing there is, and he's always singing my songs and talking about me. He's the sweetest guy and so nice to me. So that was a big thrill.
Best song you ever wrote?
I don't know. I guess American Pie is the best song I ever wrote.
Safe answer, right? I like that very much. Favorite city to play? Favorite
city would be Sydney, Australia.
Is that because of the venue? Is that because of the venue you played, or you just love the city?
I just love the people over there. I love the city. I wrote an album called Botanical Gardens because of my strolls through the botanical gardens in Sydney, Australia, right near the Sydney Opera House. I began touring the world in 1972, so I've done maybe 22 tours of Australia and New Zealand, everywhere, every way you can imagine, little towns, small towns, big towns. Yeah. And I was the first person to play the Sydney Opera House from America.
Man, and speaking of America, you come to me from the West Coast, but you got New England roots here as well. I'm talking to you from New England. What do we choose, West Coast living or New England living? What is it?
For me, it's the West Coast now. I enjoy being out here. I like the cars. I like the comfort. I like the ease. I'm getting weak. I'm getting, I got to get stronger. I got to get tougher and get back to my house in Maine for a while, plow the driveway.
That'll make you tougher.
I used to do it all the time.
Oh, yeah. Not too bad on snow this year, but still cold.
Yeah, well, there's still March left. You never know.
That's speaking like a true New Englander right there. Don McLean, man, what a pleasure it has been to speak with you. Thanks for taking some time.
Wow, what a great time I've had. Thank you for the great questions and your nice personality, and good luck with your blog and your life, and we'll meet again someday.
Let's do it, my man. Stay healthy, all right?
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.